Welcome, everyone. This is the third in a series of programs on HR value and business impact. In each of these programs, we've been sharing some research findings, methods, and tools that you can use in your own organization. And we'll share some case examples from HR leaders who've actually lived through them. I'm Jerry Seibert of Metrus Group, and my guest today will be Allan Weisberg. Our focus will be on onboarding, leader development, and succession planning, particularly at the executive level. Before we get into that, just a quick minute on who Metrus is. For 30 years, Metrus Group has served as a trusted advisor to business. We are researchers and practitioners, and we are very strong believers in sharing knowledge, with many articles and books published and available through the Metrus Institute, including our two most recent books, Hidden Drivers of Success, which dives deep into how you can leverage employee insights for strategic advantage, and Fulfilled, Critical Life Choices, which offers tools to help you on your personal journey, as well as approaches that can help your employees become more mindful, resilient, and engaged. We work with clients from smaller nonprofits to some of the largest corporations in the world to assess challenges, deliver insights through analytics, and partner on interventions that impact business results, from executive team alignment to leader and team development to strategy and scorecard refinement. When Allan suggested today's topic, I thought it would be fascinating, and I dove into some of the books we've published and the databases we've built to pull out some insights. Now, at Metrus, we conduct a lot of organizational surveys, a lot of employee surveys, and a lot of stakeholder surveys for HR functions. And we've created some large databases, and I'd like to share some of what we've learned. Leaders need to help their teams win by achieving extraordinary results, results that outpace the competition. But we've seen three potential errors in selection, development, and succession that can lead to mediocre leaders or even failed leaders. One is an overfocus on competencies that do not specifically create results. These often fail to include key people outcomes like retention, engagement, alignment. Two is an over-reliance on competencies rather than the behaviors that we expect those competencies to deliver. We love our competency models in HR, but sometimes we fail to acknowledge that someone can possess competencies but not execute them in practice. For example, great communicators who sit in their office and do email instead. Third is focusing solely on business results rather than the how that achieves them. And in this error, there's a failure to understand how results are altered by people. Think about all the leaders who are failing now, leaders who achieved tremendous results but crossed lines in how they treated people. And not just crossing lines of conduct or harassment. It could be reaching goals by pushing your people so hard that they burn out, or managing by fear and humiliation. Many of us have known leaders who seemed to get a pass on living the company values because they were achieving some goal of great importance to the CEO or the board. What is needed for successful leaders? Well, in our research, we covered this pretty extensively in one of our books, The ACE Advantage. And in that, we concluded that there are at least three things that need to be done right. One is to create a team that is aligned not just with the vision, mission, and goals of the company, but with the values, the brand promise, customer needs, including when the customer is another department that's depending on you. Second is to ensure that the team has the right competencies, information, and resources to meet customer or internal stakeholder expectations. And third is to create an engaged workforce that is willing to put in discretionary effort and advocate on behalf of the organization. Leaders who can build and maintain a high ACE team, high on alignment, capabilities, and engagement, we have found are extremely successful. We've done a lot of linkage research within organizations, connecting success on these factors to success on productivity metrics, financial, customer satisfaction, retention metrics. There's a very strong linkage here. But what are the implications for leader development and succession? Well, I think they're pretty clear. Right from onboarding, there needs to be a focus on the importance of alignment, capabilities, and engagement as critical perspectives in managing people. We also need to identify potential leaders who can develop these specific skills and help them hone their ACE leadership skills. We need to coach existing managers to help them see talent management blind spots and close those gaps. We need to provide clear expectations for what people leaders need to develop and excel at, and provide developmental experiences that really enable them to do so. And finally, we need to provide assessment tools to help leaders know where they are against talent optimization best practices. Now, how well does HR do on these? Well, we've done a lot of HR stakeholder surveys, where we've gotten feedback for HR groups from managers at all levels of the organization. And the feedback is kind of mixed. When it comes to onboarding, about 45% of the ratings that the typical HR group gets are favorable. That is a rating of good or very good on a 5-point scale. Leader development, also about 45%, but succession planning and coaching, much less favorable, 31% and 20%. So for coaching, only about 1 in 5 of HR stakeholders is saying that they're getting good or very good results from HR in that space. How can that affect a company? Well, I'll give you a real-life example. So this was a global business services company that we worked with, surveyed the whole workforce, but took a very close look at the 100 top leaders. And what we found is that even though 3 out of 4 employees in our database in general say they were onboarded effectively, and a similar number say they have reasonable work-life balance, that wasn't what we found here. It was pretty clear that this organization had a problem. 30% of the senior leaders did not feel there was anyone in the company who could act as a coach or a mentor for them. 40% felt their personal onboarding process really did not help prepare them for their role. And a majority, 53%, felt work and home life were seriously out of balance. And in fact, on all 3 of these measures, these top leaders fared worse than the average employee in the company. How important is HR's performance in this space? Well, in a recent national study we conducted, we looked at almost 20 core deliverables for HR, from talent acquisition to designing and developing teams to rolling out self-service technology. And we used some advanced modeling to see how much impact each of these deliverables had on stakeholder perceptions of the overall value delivered by HR and on HR's effectiveness at risk mitigation. Now, of the factors that we've been talking about today, the role of coach and confidant, whether filled by HR or arranged by HR, was a top 5 value driver, meaning that success or failure here has a disproportionate impact on how executives and leaders judge the overall value delivered by human resources. When it comes to helping the company manage risk, coaching, leader development, and succession planning were all among the most important factors. More important even than talent retention, which was a little bit of a surprise, but maybe not that much of a surprise when you think about the costs and risks of failed leaders. And now, to help us understand a little bit more about those risks, I'm going to introduce my guest, Allan Weisberg. Allan has been a vice president of HR at 3 Johnson & Johnson companies and other places. But among those J&J companies was Ethicon, which was then the largest J&J company. He was chief learning officer for over 5 years at a time when J&J ranked #1 in the world for leader development. And he served on a number of boards: ATD, the Association for Talent Development, Atlantic Health, Union County College. Welcome, Allan.
Thanks, Jerry. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to start by asking our listeners a rhetorical question. How many of you have led a process to hire a new senior executive who has failed? I bet many of you are thinking of an example. I know that I am, and to be honest with you, I'm thinking of a couple. What's so frustrating is you think that you did everything right. You may have hired a search firm that was very well regarded and expensive. You had good executives in the selection process, and you received excellent references. So you hired the individual, really being excited about it, and the new leader failed. You think about the impact to the business from the failure. Obviously, poor results, disruption to the business, impact on employee engagement and alignment, and using a scientific term, a real mess. By the way, if this has occurred in your organization, you are not alone. Independently, the Center for Creative Leadership and Harvard Business Review both estimate that 40 to 60% of new executives fail in the first 18 months. You know, what's really surprising about this is that the success rate has not changed very much in the last 40 years.
So, Allan, that's some pretty astonishing statistics. Do you have any specific examples you can share, executives who failed?
Jerry, I sure do. And let me give you a couple that have been in the press, I think, over the years. Ron Johnson was an incredibly successful Apple executive who went to JCPenney and famously failed. Well, what about Bob Nardelli, who went from GE to Home Depot? GE at the time rated the top company in the world, went to Home Depot as chairman and didn't succeed.
Sure. Now that you start talking about them, you do hear about executives like that. I mean, who can forget John Scully at Apple after Steve Jobs was out the first time?
Exactly, a great example. And, and you're making me think as well. And what about all these football coaches that were successful for one team and then joined another team and failed? It's really startling when you think about it.
Yeah, it's surprising how often it happens. So, how can we increase the success rate?
I think it's a great question. And by the way, I don't think you can ever be perfect in this process, but I really do believe that you can improve your rate of success by putting together a great process. And based on my research and my long history of hiring senior executives, it boils down to 4 issues that need to be evaluated and fixed in an organization.
Okay, and so these 4 issues are the ones you gave me the list for. So please go on.
Yeah, sure. So you first of all, ineffective recruitment process, and that's right. You may have a recruitment process that doesn't get you the right hire. It may give you a lot of different metrics like speed to hire, reduce cost, an area like that. But in the area of getting the top people that are going to be successful in an organization, it doesn't meet the mark. I'm not going to generalize, but that most organizations, when they're hiring top executives, identify candidates through executive search or an internal search process. The individuals are interviewed by executives who have their own criteria, and they give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. The most thumbs up typically win. Reference checks are identified by the recruit. They're checked, and obviously they're perfect, and the individual is hired. This process is fraught with problems. In my executive coaching practice, I often see the aftermath of the process. Executives who are qualified are hired and fail because they don't fit the organization's real needs or real behaviors that they want. These bad results are often based on what I call hiring fever. You are so anxious to hire someone that you overlook the obvious issues that are there and are there in the process. Interestingly, many organizations are modifying the recruitment process to look at candidates from a lot of diverse dimensions. And some of these dimensions are using testing, the idea of not using it in a vacuum, but using it as part of the process. Project presentations by the candidate. Interestingly, a number of years ago, I had the opportunity to sit through Microsoft when they were presentations done by potential candidates for engineering positions within Microsoft. And they had the individuals sit through and make presentations to the engineering staff to really make sure that they really clearly understood the engineering process. Interestingly, someone I coached a number of years ago is interviewing for a company president job, and he was being asked to make a presentation. So it's moved from the technical area to the leadership area in terms of the whole area of making presentations. Another area is targeted interviewing, giving each interviewer an important criteria to evaluate rather than having everybody interview based on their own criteria that is very, very generalized. Another area is forensic reference checking. Really, rather than just using or even using the references that the person gives you, really understanding from where the individual comes and are there other avenues to get feedback. I've had countless times where I've heard about failures of candidates, and what's happened is I've been told, well, didn't you know the person didn't succeed in the last place? And it was interesting, the organization didn't know because they just followed the same reference checks that the individual gave them. Another area is an area, just informal time, is really having an opportunity to have dinner or lunch with the candidate to understand who they are, what values do they bring, you know, how are they when they're sitting and relaxing and just talking. Very important. So you're not getting them in a stage where they're just following a script. And there are many other creative ways to really get to know who you're hiring. The next three, failures, really I wanted to talk about are things that when the executive is hired. The second area is lack of clarity by the organization when someone's hired. Many times organizations do not have a clear understanding of real success factors and expectations of the position. Many times organizations leave it up to the new hire. Sometimes they figure it out, and frankly, other times they don't. It amazes me how often the key stakeholder alignment isn't there before the process begins. And I've talked to many individuals later down in their careers where they said how confusing it was for them because they didn't understand the real important criteria, what was going to be a success factor. The third area is lack of behavior alignment of a new executive is joining an organization. So often a new leader is hired and told, we want you to make change. You know what the reality is? The organization wants you to change certain things and not change others. And the hardest part for a new leader is figuring out which is which. Also, do they want you to go fast or slow? What about being direct or indirect? Is the organization willing to change to the new leadership styles? So many of these questions are in the new leader's mind, and they don't have a real good way of clearly understanding how the organization wants them to act. So much of this will have a direct impact on a new leader's success. If there's no direction, the individual will use the style that they've used in the past, which frankly may or may not work. The fourth and last area that I'll talk about today is inadequate onboarding. And you heard Jerry talk about how the perception of onboarding in terms of an HR's role in that. When I coach a new leader, I often tell them to first take time to understand. Understand what works well, what doesn't. What about speed? What can you change? What should you not change? Too often new leaders who don't have proper onboarding act before they understand, which also can lead to failure. You know, so much of what I'm talking about today is using a consistent and effective process and measuring much more than the qualifications and experience. What we're really talking about are really the make or break areas of emotional intelligence.
Those are some big challenges, and it's shocking how common they are across organizations. But Allan, in your practice, what recommendations do you have? How do you help clients with these problems?
Yeah, Jerry, great question. And you know, 4 areas I'll talk about today. One is using facts and data, targeted employee surveys, using the fact finding. We are experts in employee surveys and providing a new leader with information. And this information can be incredibly valuable so that they're not perceiving something or emotionally thinking about something, but factually seeing something so that anything they do can be based on data and facts that will help them and guide them to the proper direction. The second area is helping to develop a strong employee brand.
Actually, before we go on to that,
Sure.
Allan, you know, the targeted employee surveys, I think, can be really valuable, and that's something I head up the survey practice for Metrus, and we'll often provide leaders with what we call an ACE scorecard. And what we do there is this: what I'm showing on the screen now, we actually map the survey results to the organization chart. It's kind of a unique way of viewing survey results. And it maps them, by mapping them directly to the organizational chart, we find that it really resonates with the executives and lets them pull out insights that might not be immediately obvious. They can see patterns, hot spots, bright spots. They can see whether issues are consistent across all the groups that roll up to them, or whether they're unique, whether there are groups that might be pulling the overall averages down. I've found when sharing a scorecard like this with an executive or with an entire executive team, that they can spend an amazing amount of time dissecting it and just get great value from this sort of a picture of the organization.
Absolutely, Jerry. I think there's great insights you can have. And again, I'm a big proponent of facts and data really guiding you. It's not the only thing, but it's so critical to have that facts and data. The second area is helping to develop a strong employee brand. Many organizations don't get the quality talent pool that they need because they don't effectively portray the real positive attributes of the organization. And you know what? One of the things we have to understand is that we are really in a war for talent. If you look at unemployment rates, they are low, and executives have choices, and the people that you want are people that are succeeding today. So it's really important to create a great employee brand that really reflects what's going on in your organization. Branding is so important, and it's really an overlooked area in many organizations. It's another area that we really help organizations with.
Yeah, I would agree. And often when people think about their employer brand, they're not thinking about it at the senior leader level. They're thinking about, how are we going to attract more of our frontline employees, our individual contributors? But I would say at the senior leadership level, it's even more important that the brand match the reality and that it not be aspirational, because I think otherwise you really run the risk of disappointing or dismaying that new hire when they come in and find that the organization is not like how they were led to expect it would be. I think you run the risk of losing them in that type of situation.
Absolutely, Jerry. And I have an example of an organization that a new executive went to and was told that the organization was open and informal. And to your point, the organization was not open and informal. They wanted to be that way, but the reality wasn't. And it really caused this new leader some unexpected problems because he was very open about how he did things that was so different than the rest of the organization. So it's a great point about it really being reflective of who you are. The third area I want to talk about is the redesign of a recruitment process, including new and innovative processes that will make your process more effective. So many organizations in HR measure time to hire, cost of hire, and things like that. In just about every job, and particularly in executive jobs, the critical and most important factor is the effectiveness of the new leader that comes into the job. And really looking at your processes not on speed and cost, but rather on what's going to get you the most effective candidates and most successful candidates. And what I found to be really effective is when you use a number of different diverse processes that really let you look at the different dimensions of the executive that you're hiring.
So really there's 2 points you're making here. One is focusing not on the types of operational metrics that HR needs to consider when filling bulk positions, the time to fill and number of vacant positions, those sorts of things, but more the quality of hire and really the impact of the hire, and then also process changes like the things you mentioned earlier, incorporating testing in an appropriate way, having candidates make presentations, using that targeted interviewing approach you described, which I really like, where you don't have everybody asking the same set of questions, but each interviewer is charged with doing a bit of a deep dive on a particular topic or skill set.
No, great point. I think it's so important, and diversity is really the key. So again, so you're able to see all the different dimensions. Some of this is a science, and some of this is a little bit of an art. It's the idea of combining the best of both worlds. The fourth area I wanted to talk about is executive coaching. When I was a VP of HR, and I was for many years, I always hired an executive coach to work with a new senior leader. My rationale was simple. The process of hiring a new senior executive was so expensive, and there was so much at stake in success. How could I not buy an insurance policy and really at a fraction of the cost to enhance the success rate? Bottom line is that it helped in so many ways. And it's funny, I keep in contact with some of the executives that I did hire, and they do speak to the coaching that they received in areas that really helped them see things that they really didn't quite understand, because they didn't understand this phenomena about being the new hire in an organization. So it was really valuable. And we at Metrus have great coaches who really have a track record of helping new leaders become successful. It's really an important element of the process. And again, it's a cost-effective process that really makes so much sense to make sure that you're getting the right executive and they're getting off to the right start with the organization.
Yeah, I think these are great recommendations. And when you look at them in the big context of the cost of failure for a new senior hire, like you said, these are not major investments or major efforts that the organization really has to put out. They're like an insurance policy. I like that way of looking at it. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our listeners do as well. Any final thoughts for us, Allan?
I sure do. And what I wanted to close with, and I've really been thinking about this a great deal, this is, HR for many years has been talking about becoming business focused, having a seat at the table, which is a statement is always interesting to me. I think this is an important process for HR to own and be accountable business leaders to make sure the organization achieves what it wants to achieve and gets the right leaders in the organization. HR really has an opportunity here to step up to the plate, and I know many HR leaders are doing this today, and I think it's incumbent upon all HR leaders to really step up in this area and help organizations successfully bring on new great leaders to the organization.
All right. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody for their time today. We really do appreciate you joining us. If any of these are areas that you are struggling with, we're happy to talk with you. You can pick our brains on changes you might make internally. And if you need, more than that, we're happy to talk to you about that as well. Our contact information is on the screen, and we hope you enjoyed today's program.